Star Trek has captivated fans for decades by daringly going where no other brand has gone before. However, even the most ardent fans may have overlooked the little-known facts behind its famous journeys through time and space. Even the most devoted Trekkies are still surprised by the many surprises in Star Trek, from subliminal Easter eggs to behind-the-scenes mysteries. We'll discover these little-known truths as we explore the unknown, illuminating how the show's innovative moments and imaginative decisions influenced its lasting legacy. Are you prepared to learn something new about the Star Trek universe you haven't noticed before? Come along on this extraterrestrial adventure as we reveal the intriguing mysteries of one of the most renowned television series. Illegal Uniform. Due to severe financial limitations at the time of Star Trek's debut, producers Robert Justman and Herb Solow had to use unusual and divisive strategies. Instead of employing experienced costume makers and following union regulations, they used a sweatshop, which was both economical and questionable. Overnight, the garments were finished out of sight of union leaders and studio monitors. The completed outfits were smuggled through a back window to avoid detection as part of this clandestine operation. Although this choice was undoubtedly resourceful, its morality is still in doubt. The series' future goals were symbolized by the uniform's striking colors and simple design, which made them iconic. It's interesting to note that this frugal strategy unintentionally enhanced the show's allure and genuineness. It also demonstrates the extent of the production team's creativity in bringing the Star Trek concept to life despite challenging conditions. Although their birth story adds a layer of intricacy, these outfits are today hailed as enduring franchise emblems. Spock, or One. Although Gene Roddenberry had a groundbreaking vision for Star Trek, concessions were unavoidable. He had to choose between keeping Spock, whose look network officials considered satanic, and keeping Majel Barrett's character, Number One, the rational, emotionless female first officer, during the pilot episode's reshoot. At a period when mainstream audiences viewed a female lead as too dangerous, Roddenberry reluctantly decided to cut Number One, but he incorporated her character's qualities into Spock, saving them. The outcome was a revolutionary figure, an extraterrestrial battling his repressed human emotions and Vulcan reasoning. In addition to giving Leonard Nimoy a chance to shine, this decision provided Star Trek with one of its most recognizable characters. This compromise molded Spock's distinct personality, which served as a prism for examining complex issues of humanity and identity. She laid the groundwork for a character who would change science fiction and enthrall viewers for centuries despite Number One being shelved. Suitable for TV? Star Trek stretched boundaries in ways other television programs of its era would never have ventured. The program frequently addressed controversial subjects. However, there were drawbacks. Network censors carefully examined scenes and scripts and rejected anything they thought was too provocative or politically charged. Nevertheless, the authors deftly figured out how to get subversive concepts under the radar. For instance, a seemingly harmless premise about an alien conflict in the episode A Private Little War was a covert critique of the Vietnam War. The writers made sure their social message was not compromised by diverting censors with steamy sequences, such as characters wearing scanty clothing or sharing a passionate kiss. Under the pretense of sci-fi adventure, Star Trek was able to tackle taboo subjects like racism, violence, and gender equality because of this type of narrative inventiveness. In retrospect, these small additions were bold acts of disobedience that brought the show above the level of entertainment and made it a forum for talking about critical cultural concerns. This legacy continues today. Shatner's Odd Requests. Although William Shatner became a public culture legend for his depiction of Captain James T. Kirk, his behind-the-scenes demands frequently caused controversy. Writer Norman Spinrad provided one of the more well-known examples, revealing that Shatner insisted on having the most lines in each episode, even if it meant changing the scripts to diminish the contributions of other characters. His spirit of competition carried over into the credits. It was made clear in a 1966 document that Leonard Nimoy's credit font could not be more than 75% of Shatner's. Shatner's wish to keep his celebrity status was mirrored in this pettiness. Despite these eccentricities, his magnetism and command of the screen contributed significantly to Star Trek's popularity. Although Shatner's demeanor softened with time, his initial demands remain an intriguing part of the show's past. Even though it annoyed his coworkers, Shatner's exaggerated character on and off screen ensured Captain Kirk would always be regarded as the ultimate final frontier hero. Writing struggles. Starting a groundbreaking science fiction show like Star Trek presented unique difficulties, particularly in the writing department. Despite having a clear idea, Gene Roddenberry had trouble locating qualified writers. Roddenberry had to get talent from unusual places because most seasoned television writers were not conversant with the intricacies of science fiction. To address the urgent need for scripts, he contacted writers, sci-fi magazine authors, and even the office workers of Desilu Studios. These authors contributed original concepts but also needed a lot of help to modify their narratives for the screen. The team was forced to put quality before quantity due to the exorbitant expense of these scripts, which further stretched the budget. Notwithstanding the challenges, this unorthodox strategy gave rise to some of the most enduring and provocative television shows ever. Because of the variety of viewpoints, Star Trek was able to tackle morality, science, and the human condition in ways that audiences found very compelling. Angry rewrites. Gene Roddenberry's careful revisions to the Star Trek screenplays became a topic of contention among writers. Although his commitment ensured the stories reflected his outlook on humanity's future, his revisions frequently infuriated the original writers. Harlan Ellison's The City on the Edge of Forever was one of the most notorious examples. Ellison's initial script was a complex story about a drug-addicted crew member whose actions had disastrous results. Roddenberry's rewriting eliminated many of the darker and socially critical themes in favor of a more sanitized plot. Ellison wanted his name removed from the credits since he was so disappointed by the modifications, but his request was turned down. Ellison and Roddenberry engaged in years of public arguments over this rewrite. Notwithstanding the controversy, the episode is still regarded as one of Star Trek's most renowned, garnering praise from fans and a Hugo Award. This emphasizes the conflict between collaborative narrative and creative control that characterized many of Star Trek's productions. The Captain and Yeoman Janice Rand. One of the most disturbing scenes in Star Trek was introduced in the episode The Enemy Within. The darker part of Captain Kirk's personality, divided into two personas, good and evil, displays the unbridled strength of unbridled anger. In one incredibly unsettling moment, evil Kirk tries to push himself on Yeoman Janice Rand, played by Grace Lee Whitney, after cornering her. Although Rand's escape was a minor triumph for her character, Whitney found herself considering the story's repercussions. She described Spock's subsequent insensitive remark to Rand as nasty and uncharacteristic, adding to the anguish. In addition to pushing the envelope for its period, the sequence demonstrated the difficulties of depicting humanity's worst tendencies on TV. Whitney's frank observations highlighted the emotional toll such situations may have on actors and viewers. Despite its contentious nature, the episode still examines morality and duality in the Star Trek universe. Enjoying the cast. The development of Star Trek was made more problematic by the many overlaps between Gene Roddenberry's personal and professional lives. He started dating Majel Barrett, who played Nurse Chapel, and Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, while he was still married to Eileen Roddenberry. The cast and crew were frank about their connections. Barrett lived with Roddenberry in the first few weeks of shooting. Nichols then disclosed that when Roddenberry's devotion to Barrett grew stronger, he ended their relationship amicably. In addition to her marriage to Roddenberry, Barrett's crucial participation in the series, both on and off screen, earned her the loving moniker, the First Lady of Star Trek. With appearances spanning decades, her marriage to Roddenberry cemented her status in Star Trek. Even though this private drama occasionally led to conflict, it also highlighted the intensely complicated setting in which the legendary series was produced. Avoiding the love. After playing Spock, Leonard Nimoy became an immediate favorite among fans, but his personal life suffered due to the intense public attention. As Spock's fame grew rapidly, Nimoy could not move through public areas without getting surrounded. He resorted to alcohol as a coping mechanism, which soon developed into binge drinking. Nimoy developed such a bad drinking habit that he frequently started his days with a drink and drank till the next morning. He never wavered in his professionalism on set, though. Aware of his difficulties, the cast and crew decided to discreetly support him, honoring his capacity to compartmentalize his problems. After realizing that something needed to change, Nimoy started a healing process that he subsequently detailed in his autobiography. Fans responded favorably to his openness about addiction, which made him seem like a strong and sympathetic character. This time in Nimoy's life is evidence of his tenacity and commitment to art. Fighting for renewal. The struggle for survival in Star Trek was a bit as dramatic as its on-screen exploits. The sitcom Lucille Ball's Desilu Studios had produced initially had an uncertain future once Paramount Pictures took over after Gulf and Western purchased the studio. Given the show's poor weekly ratings and lack of syndication prospects, Paramount saw it as a financial burden. According to reports, they even offered Roddenberry to buy back the show for $150,000, which he could not pay. Paramount continued creating the series despite its reservations, eventually reaping the rewards of its cult following and subsequent syndication success. Many believe Lucille Ball's early support of the series kept it in its infancy. Paramount's involvement in Star Trek motion pictures later solidified the franchise's legacy. This turbulent time demonstrates how nearly Star Trek was canceled, proving that even legendary shows can owe their survival to a combination of willpower, timing, and a little luck. Pride. LGBTQ+ presence was conspicuously lacking throughout Star Trek's initial run, despite the show's innovative examination of societal concerns. Although same-sex love was ignored entirely, the show explored heterosexual relationships, hinted at interspecies romances, and even hinted at some unusual dynamics. In private, George Takei, who played the adored astrophysicist Hikura Sulu, disapproved of this omission. During the run of the show, Takei, a trailblazer himself, lived in private as a gay man, but later in life he publicly lamented the lack of representation. Takei's standing as a cultural icon was further cemented in 2005 when he made his public coming-out statement, which was warmly received. Since then, Takei's support of LGBTQ+ rights has become a significant aspect of his legacy, demonstrating the progress society and science fiction literature has made in accepting diversity. Can't bear to see himself. Fans may be surprised to learn that the iconic Captain Kirk, played by William Shatner, has never seen himself in the part that made his career. Shatner accepts the content. Instead, he finds it too awkward to watch himself on film. He never retained any costumes or props from the set, demonstrating his distaste for souvenirs. When questioned about this, Shatner acknowledged that his younger self preferred fashionable suits over mementos and valued functionality above nostalgia. In retrospect, he joked, "I should have known better." Despite this, Shatner's portrayal of Kirk has become a cultural phenomenon, and fans worldwide have fiercely embraced the character. With innumerable rewatches and tributes, viewers continue to honor Shatner's legacy, even though he may not be able to relive his performances. False positive royalties. Although the recognizable Star Trek music has come to represent the series, the backstory is anything but peaceful. Royalties were first offered to composer Alexander Courage each time an episode aired. A deal with Gene Roddenberry, however, fundamentally altered that. Roddenberry offered to write the theme's lyrics in exchange for 50% of Courage's profits. The lyrics were never used since they were awkward and unsingable. Roddenberry, however, insisted on keeping his portion of the earnings. It caused long-lasting friction between the two, and Courage felt deceived, viewing it as a predatory commercial tactic. The instrumental theme of Courage is nevertheless a timeless masterwork despite this. The narrative emphasizes how ruthless the entertainment business can be, even in groundbreaking shows like Star Trek. Sabotage by NBC. One of Hollywood's most notorious tales of network sabotage is the story of Star Trek's battle with NBC. Star Trek was incredibly expensive to create, and the show's ratings just didn't justify its price, even with its groundbreaking content and quickly expanding fan following. NBC boldly decided to play Star Trek at one of the worst times of the week, Fridays at 10 p.m., when many viewers were already preparing for the weekend. It was thought the network attempted to compel the program to cancel with this calculated maneuver. To make matters worse, NBC cut the budget by over 60%, which made episode production even more difficult. The innovative inventor, Gene Roddenberry, was not one to give up. He galvanized the devoted viewers of the program and urged them to send NBC letters of support. Although it wasn't enough to stop Star Trek from being canceled after its final season, the fervent fan outpouring helped keep the show on the air for a third season. Gene Coon. Often referred to as the unsung hero of Star Trek, Gene L. Coon was a key figure in the development of the series. Coon gave the cosmos depth and richness, even though Roddenberry came up with the idea. He established essential components such as Starfleet Command, the Klingons, and the Federation's diplomatic principles. Additionally, Coon wrote some of the most memorable episodes of the show, such as The Devil in the Dark, which highlighted the moral complexity of the Star Trek world. Despite his noteworthy contributions, tensions with Roddenberry caused him to leave before the third season. Coon is credited by fans and historians for striking a balance between Roddenberry's idealism and realistic storytelling, establishing a model that subsequent Star Trek incarnations would adhere to. Although his name isn't as well known as Roddenberry's, his legacy endures. William Shatner and J.J. Abrams. Leonard Nimoy's Spock was effectively incorporated into the 2009 reboot of Star Trek by J.J. Abrams, but he encountered difficulties with William Shatner. According to reports, there was a conflict between Shatner and Abrams because Shatner desired a prominent role, while Abrams planned to concentrate on a younger staff. Publicly criticizing Abrams, Shatner implied that he was being unjustly left out. But when the movie came out, Shatner commended Chris Payne's new portrayal of Captain Kirk and even credited Abrams for the reboot. They seemed to set aside their disagreements as their connection grew warmer over time. It's interesting to note that Shatner's absence from the movie brought attention to the delicate balance that must be struck between paying respect to the original series and getting the venerable property to new viewers. A blessing in disguise. With the catchphrase, "Live long and prosper," the Vulcan salute has become a worldwide gesture extending beyond Star Trek. Surprisingly, Leonard Nimoy's recollection of attending an Orthodox Jewish synagogue as a child is where it all began. Young Nimoy was deeply impacted by seeing the Kohanim, priests, spread their hands in a particular pattern during a blessing. The hand motion, similar to the Hebrew letter Shin, represents the word for God, Shaddai. Most of the congregation was told to look away, but Nimoy peered through his fingers, fascinated by the mystery of the occasion. Years later, he combined his personal history with science fiction by introducing the gesture into Spock's persona. This small but significant feature enhanced Spock's character and provided fans with an unanticipated cultural link that has been relevant for years. Many, many dresses. Decades later, the recognizable miniskirts worn by the female crew members of Star Trek continue to be a source of controversy. Like their male counterparts, women in the initial pilot wore formal, functional clothes. But as the show went on, the fashion choices changed to mini dresses, which some viewers deemed misogynistic. Star Trek specialist Nigel Mitchell justified the choice by highlighting the clothing's unisex nature and pointing out that, on occasion, male crew members also wore it. Despite this, the portrayal provoked continuous discussions around objectification and gender expectations in the media. As fans struggled with how Star Trek's progressive messages occasionally conflicted with its representation of women, the debate reflected the show's broader cultural impact. Whether you like it or not, the mini dresses have endured as a representation of the series' style and its daring, if flawed, exploration of gender roles in the 1960s. Lack of respect. Fans were shocked and upset when William Shatner did not attend Leonard Nimoy's burial in 2015. Despite Shatner's explanation that he had previous obligations, rumors circulated that the two were still at odds. Even though they played one of the most adored couples on television, their relationship off-screen was frequently tense. These tensions were renewed when a video of Nimoy was incorporated into Shatner's documentary, The Captains, Against His Wishes. They allegedly became estranged in later years as a result of the incident. Recognizing Nimoy's pivotal part in Star Trek's success and shared cultural heritage, Shatner has apologized for their unresolved conflicts. fans are prompted to consider the personal struggles that underlie the beloved figures by the story's lesson that even legendary partnerships may be complicated. Male objectification. Star Trek's progressive ideals broke down barriers and helped create a less talked-about trope, male objectification. Captain Kirk became an implicit icon of male attraction by frequently navigating interstellar diplomacy with his charm and physical attributes. However, a more overt instance of objectification was exposed by Michael Forrest, who portrayed the Greek god Apollo in Who Mourns for Adonais. To get a smooth edge, costumers insisted on taping his chest and applying makeup to finish the look. According to Forrest, the procedure was humiliating and reflected a double standard seldom mentioned in the 1960s. Although Kirk's amorous adventures were praised, Forrest's story highlights the sometimes disregarded constraints placed on male performers to conform to aesthetic standards. This dynamic, which combined innovative narrative with the realities of Hollywood production techniques in the 1960s, brought even another dimension to Star Trek's history. Shatner vs. Takei. The long-running drama Shatner vs. Takei pits George Takei against William Shatner and has enthralled Star Trek fans for years. Takei complained about Shatner's overbearing presence in sequences during the original series, which sparked the tension on site. Takei has been open in interviews about Shatner's tendency to put the camera on himself rather than work as a team player. Their hostility increased over the years, mainly after Shatner skipped Takei's wedding and was seen in both their on- and off-screen interactions. Shatner responded to Takei's criticism of him on social media by expressing bewilderment and grief about their separation, suggesting that Takei's problems with him sprang from personal miscommunications. With both stars making jokes about their rivalry during appearances, it has become a public spectacle, bringing laughter and lingering tension to their complex relationship. Initially rejected. The Cage, the first pilot to fail to take off, existed before Star Trek as we know it today. The idea seemed too esoteric to network executives who were concerned it wouldn't appeal to general viewers. Additionally, they were worried that Spock's satanic appearance, specifically his pointed ears, would turn off viewers. The presence of a female first officer, a daring choice for the 1960s, added to their unease. Gene Roddenberry persevered in the face of overwhelming opposition. He changed the show, softened some contentious parts, and replaced most actors, except Leonard Nimoy. When Where No Man Has Gone Before, a fresh pilot for Star Trek, was eventually approved, his perseverance paid off. The original rejection ultimately made the series' eventual success possible, as Roddenberry's inventive fortitude demonstrated that sometimes a brilliant idea only requires improvement and persistence to thrive. Some actors lost hearing. The cast of Star Trek occasionally experienced unexpected consequences due to the show's ambitious special effects. Spock throws a pebble that detonates as it hits the ground in the episode The Apple. Several actors, including DeForest Kelley, Dr. McCoy, had temporary hearing problems due to the explosion's extreme volume. Some even needed medical assistance. Later, Kelley disclosed that the event caused him to live the remainder of his life with tinnitus, a chronic ringing in his ears. Since TV sound engineering was still in its experimental stage in the 1960s, safety precautions were frequently disregarded in favor of producing eye-catching effects. The event demonstrates the dangers actors had to take when making a groundbreaking science fiction series in which practical effects were essential. Even though safety regulations and technology have since advanced, this accident serves as a reminder of the costs incurred to realize Star Trek's thrilling tales. Spock was initially supposed to be painted red. Although Spock's distinctive yellowish skin and extraterrestrial characteristics came to represent Star Trek, the character's look may have been very different. According to early ideas, Spock would be a red-skinned extraterrestrial from Mars with an uncanny appearance. However, producers found that red paint looked excessively murky and dark on black and white televisions, which were still widely used in the 1960s during screen tests. The plan was abandoned, and Spock's skin tone was changed to his now famous tint to ensure his characteristics were visible and sympathetic to the viewers. Additionally, the idea of a red-skinned Spock ran the risk of confirming the stereotype that aliens are dangerous, which Roddenberry aimed to dispel. Spock's final appearance, which included his pointed ears and furrowed brows, ultimately achieved the ideal harmony between familiar and alien, solidifying his status as one of the most recognizable figures in science fiction. Tiger attack on set. The crew used a genuine Bengal tiger to create a memorable Star Trek episode shore leave scene. But when the tiger suddenly escaped, mayhem ensued. William Shatner remembered the harrowing scene where the enormous predator roamed the set free. "I was awestruck by this amazing animal one minute, and then I was paralyzed with terror," Shatner recalled. As skilled handlers hurried to get control of the tiger, the cast and crew scurried to safety. Although the tiger was securely restrained, and fortunately no one was hurt, the episode had a profound effect. Shatner acknowledged that the event made him more humble because he realized how dangerous working with living animals can be. The incident gave the production an additional level of drama and continues to be an engrossing behind-the-scenes story for Star Trek fans, highlighting the unforeseen difficulties in realizing the grandiose goals of the series. D.C. Fontana. Dorothy Catherine D.C. Fontana greatly influenced the Star Trek universe. She broke down barriers in a male-dominated field as the first female story editor and one of the series' most prolific authors. Fontana's contributions deepened the series, especially in how she shaped Spock's persona and Vulcan culture. Star Trek's universe was enhanced by episodes like Journey to Babel, which examined political intrigue and familial relationships. But because of the widespread misogyny of the 1960s, she concealed her gender with her initials out of concern that her screenplays wouldn't be taken seriously. Fontana worked on Star Trek, the animated series, and The Next Generation, continuing her efforts even after the original series ended. Her reputation as a pioneer for women in science fiction is still unrivaled, demonstrating that her skill as a storyteller went beyond the constraints of her time. Her impact is still celebrated by fans, who frequently point to Fontana as one of the factors that made Star Trek more than just a television program. Phase 2 never happens. In the 1970s, the unexpected revival of Star Trek reruns in syndication persuaded Paramount to create Star Trek Phase 2, a new series featuring extravagant sets, new characters, and returning cast members, including DeForest Kelley and William Shatner. Leonard Nimoy, however, refused to take part. Therefore, Zahn, a new Vulcan character, took Spock's place. The success of Star Wars altered Paramount's plans, even though there had been tremendous work, including finished scripts and costume designs. Believing that science fiction had a new promise at the box office, the company turned its attention to producing a feature picture. For Star Trek, the motion picture, a large portion of the Phase 2 foundation was reused, including sets, costumes, and several plot points. Ultimately, the move to the big screen broadened Star Trek's audience, even as fans lamented the series' demise. Paradoxically, Nimoy made a comeback for the movie, which launched a cinematic legacy that solidified the franchise's status in Hollywood history. Roddenberry forced out. The creator of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, was progressively pushed to the side of the brand. Despite being a financial success, Star Trek the Motion Picture split critics and viewers with its intricate, contemplative plot. Paramount reduced Roddenberry to a symbolic consultant position to pursue a more action-focused strategy for the follow-up. With Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is often considered among the best films in the series, producer Harve Bennett and director Nicholas Meyer were able to change the franchise's tone. Similar conflicts emerged with Roddenberry's loss of creative authority following the first 2 seasons of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Although Roddenberry's principles of exploration and hope persisted throughout the franchise, studio officials frequently disagreed with his vision in favor of more commercially successful narratives. Roddenberry's legacy lives on as the driving principle of Star Trek, influencing many fans and creators to this day, despite his diminished prominence. Leonard Nimoy only returns to direct. Leonard Nimoy's connection with Star Trek is complicated, as is the character he plays. He first hesitated to return for Star Trek the Motion Picture, but he eventually consented to film Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, as long as Spock's death was included in the script. Spock's tearful parting became one of the most famous scenes in sci-fi history, once Paramount approved it. However, Paramount decided to continue Spock's journey because of the enormous popular demand for the character's return. Nimoy consented to play the part again, but he had a new requirement. He wanted to be the director. After Paramount approved his request, Nimoy directed Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Because of the movie's popularity, he was asked to direct Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, popularly referred to as The One with the Whales. His work as a director brought the series back to life and demonstrated his versatility as a filmmaker and storyteller. Almost rebooted. Following Star Trek V: The Final Frontier's unsatisfactory critical and economic reaction, Paramount contemplated taking a risk by launching a reboot. With younger Kirk, Spock, and the rest of the crew during their Academy years, the suggested idea, Starfleet Academy, would have functioned as a prequel to the original series. Although the concept was similar to the final J.J. Abrams concept, fans and cast members were incensed at the idea of excluding the original actors from the Abrams reboot decades later. Due to the overwhelmingly negative response, Paramount abandoned the idea and created Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country instead. Following the disappointment of its predecessor, the franchise was saved by the critical and commercial success of the film, which was the last adventure of the original ensemble. This near-reboot incident demonstrates how the devoted Star Trek audience has frequently influenced the franchise's course, upholding its heritage while opening the door for new iterations. Nichelle Nichols' NASA connection. Although Nichelle Nichols' portrayal of Lieutenant Uhura broke down barriers, her off-screen contributions might have had a more significant effect. Following her work on Star Trek, Nichols joined NASA as a spokesman at a period where there was almost no diversity in space exploration. She promoted professions in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, for underrepresented groups by launching the Women in Motion initiative using her celebrity. During her national tour, Nichols encouraged applications to NASA, which produced revolutionary outcomes. The first African-American woman astronaut, Dr. Mae Jemison, entered the space program partly thanks to her efforts. Inspired by Nichols, Jemison attributed her career decision to Uhura's appearance on Star Trek. Beyond recruiting, Nichols' impact was felt. She contributed to the idea that space exploration was an inclusive, global undertaking. By embodying Star Trek's vision of a united future via her work, Nichols became a real-life trailblazer whose impact continues to inspire generations. William Shatner didn't originally audition for Kirk. William Shatner's path to Captain James T. Kirk is a tale of serendipitous timing and fate. Producers looked for a fresh captain with personality, vigor, and a sense of humor after Jeffrey Hunter's portrayal of Captain Pike in the original pilot failed to result in a series. Shatner wasn't picked immediately. Other actors were considered, but none could strike the perfect balance between seriousness and relatability. Shatner gave the character an entirely different spirit when he eventually received the call. Despite being forceful, bold, and not afraid to break the rules, his Kirk remained warm and human. Even the most fanciful sci-fi dialogue was plausible thanks to Shatner's theatrical training, which enabled him to deliver Kirk's lines with passion and gravity. His performance solidified Kirk's status as an iconic intergalactic figure and a strong leader. Shatner's unconventional charisma paved the foundation for Star Trek's long-term popularity by transforming the character into a hero that viewers could support, going beyond simple casting choices. The first interracial kiss was almost scrapped. Although it nearly didn't happen, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura's historic kiss in Plato's Stepchildren was groundbreaking. In southern states, where racial tensions were high, network executives were particularly concerned about reaction. Given its cultural significance, Roddenberry and the actors were determined to maintain the scene. The kiss was depicted as the product of aliens' telekinetic manipulation, a deft use of the plot to sidestep romanticism. Nevertheless, the studio promoted alternate takes in which the kiss was suggested rather than actual. According to reports, Nichols and Shatner purposefully flubbed the non-kiss takes so that the kiss would be utilized because they were determined to make history. Despite receiving conflicting reviews when it was first broadcast, The program became a landmark in television history. Later, Nichols disclosed that she had essentially good feedback, particularly from Southern admirers. The sequence embodied the show's enduring theme of equality and represented Star Trek's audacious vision of a future where human prejudices have been vanquished. Spock's green skin test. In the first screen tests, Leonard Nimoy applied green makeup to Spock's alien face to make him stand out from human characters. Although green felt like a daring decision, it looked muddy and unpleasant on black and white televisions. The production team soon realized that subtler touches might create an alien appearance. They focused on Spock's Vulcan traits, such as his pointed ears, angled eyebrows, and characteristic bowl haircut, rather than skin tone. The character's yellow-tinged complexion offered just enough alien differentiation in color broadcasts. Interestingly, Nimoy still had trouble applying makeup and spent much time in the chair. In the end, Spock benefited from the decision to forego the green skin because it highlighted his stern manner and made his Vulcan identity come through via personality rather than overly dramatic imagery. Spock became one of the most recognizable figures in television history thanks to this nuanced strategy. DeForest Kelley initially rejected Dr. McCoy. It wasn't easy for DeForest Kelley to become Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. Being frequently typecast as a villain in westerns, Kelley first hesitated to accept the job because he wasn't sure if Star Trek would be a viable professional choice. However, Gene Roddenberry recognized something unique in Kelley's mannerisms, a capacity to convey incisive humor and genuine sincerity. At last, Kelley consented, and his portrayal of McCoy became one of the show's most notable scenes. He had a legendary relationship with Shatner and Nimoy, and McCoy frequently acted as the emotional counterpoint to Kirk's leadership and Spock's reasoning. Fan favorites were McCoy's comments like, "I'm a doctor, not a profession," highlighting his loving yet impatient personality. McCoy became the likable protagonist of the series thanks to Kelley's realistic portrayal, which gave the crew warmth and empathy. Despite his early reservations, Kelley acknowledged that his role defined his career as McCoy. James Doohan created the Klingon language. Beyond his engineering prowess, James Doohan's beloved chief engineer Montgomery Scott had an unanticipated influence on Star Trek mythology. Doohan stepped up and created the basis for the future Klingon language when Star Trek the Motion Picture needed a foreign language for the Klingons. He made the first guttural sounds and a few words to give the language a sense of authenticity and uniqueness. His innovative use of language served as a foundation for linguist Mark Orquin, who developed Doohan's ideas into a wholly built language with vocabulary, grammar, and syntax. Klingon developed a cult following and became one of the most well-known fictional languages. Klingon is studied and spoken proficiently at conventions worldwide, and fans have translated Shakespeare into the language. Doohan's work shows how a single imaginative choice may significantly impact popular culture by turning an extraterrestrial race from a sci-fi idea into a fully realized cultural phenomenon. The budget constraints created iconic innovations. Tight financial limits in the original Star Trek series frequently prompted innovative problem-solving. The transporter, created as an alternative to the costly and time-consuming special effects needed to film shuttlecraft landings, is among the most famous. In addition to saving money, this invention became a distinctive feature of the series, with the transporter effect attracting viewers' attention. The notorious red shirt stereotype was created due to another cost-cutting tactic. Security and engineering staff were assigned red uniforms, and their high rate of casualties on away operations became a storytelling shorthand for danger. To avoid expensive, full-body transformations, several alien races were sometimes shown by merely changing human traits, such as painting skin green or adding prosthetic foreheads. These cost-effective tactics frequently called for creativity, leading to solutions crucial to Star Trek's character. These limitations contributed to the enormous fictional universe's feeling of realism and relatability. Majel Barrett played multiple roles. Often referred to as the First Lady of Star Trek, Majel Barrett was more than Gene Roddenberry's wife. She was a multifaceted artist who made a lasting impression on the brand. In the original, unreleased pilot episode, The Cage, Barrett debuted as number 1, the self-assured first cop. Barrett switched to portraying Nurse Christine Chapel in the main series after the network turned the role down. Her performances gave her roles warmth and depth despite the change. Barrett's talents went beyond that. She became the recognizable voice of the ship's computer, a role she played again in several Star Trek movies and television shows. She established herself as a key figure in the franchise with her calming, commanding voice that came to represent Federation technology. In addition to being an actor, Barrett represented the Star Trek heritage by attending conventions and engaging with fans. She was a genuine icon because of her commitment to the series and ability to play several parts. The Vulcan Salute's origins. One of the most recognizable gestures in popular culture is the Vulcan Salute, which Leonard Nimoy initially used in the episode Amok Time. But Nimoy's own experiences are where it all began. A Jewish blessing he saw during a synagogue ceremony as a child served as his inspiration. To portray the cultural depth of the Vulcans, Nimoy modified the gesture, which involves spreading the fingers into a V shape, to represent the Hebrew letter Shin, a symbol of God's name, Shaddai. Many actors initially found the gesture challenging, so Nimoy suggested they tape their fingers together. The salute's significance went beyond its initial setting and became a global representation of friendship and endurance. Fans warmly embraced it, and it is now well known outside Star Trek. Spock's character gained authenticity from Nimoy's cultural inventiveness, which also contributed to creating the franchise's enduring symbol. Data's eyes were painfully difficult to wear. Brent Spiner underwent a significant metamorphosis to play the artificial Lieutenant Commander Data in Star Trek The Next Generation. Yellow contact lenses were crucial to creating Data's unique, unearthly look. The lenses were uncomfortable, causing dryness and itching while filming, even if the effect was stunning. Long shooting days were especially difficult for Spiner because he frequently had to take them off between takes to rest his eyes. In addition to the discomfort, Spiner's cosmetics routine involved applying a shiny gold powder to his skin, which improved Data's artificial appearance, but made the task even more challenging. Despite these difficulties, Spiner's dedication to the role paid off as Data became one of the most adored characters in Star Trek history. From Spiner's attempt to comprehend humans to his innocent curiosity, fans valued the nuanced aspects of the robot. The work that went into Data's appearance demonstrated Spiner's commitment to giving the legendary character realism. Patrick Stewart almost quit after the first season. After the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation, Patrick Stewart, now widely associated with the Honorable Captain Jean-Luc Picard, nearly departed the show. Stewart, who has experience in classical British theater, was uncomfortable with American television's casual and laid-back atmosphere. He found adapting to his co-stars' lightheartedness on set challenging because he was accustomed to a more regimented and disciplined acting style. Early screenplay discrepancies and a feeling of underdeveloped characters added to Stewart's irritation and made him question the show's potential. But the authors quickly improved the narrative, and fans were won over by Stewart's unshakable commitment to Picard's moral complexity. Picard's strong performances in episodes like The Inner Light and Chain of Command solidified his status as one of the most captivating characters in the franchise. Stewart's decision to stay changed the course of the series because his performance brought The Next Generation to the attention of critics and the general public. The Borg were created due to budget cuts. Due to Star Trek The Next Generation's tight budget, the Borg, initially intended to resemble insects, suffered a dramatic change. After realizing that the expense of producing insectoid aliens was unaffordable, the production team switched to a more straightforward but no less dangerous design: cybernetic humanoids with a hive mind consciousness. This change turned out to be a brilliant move. The Borg's creepy, inhuman aspect was accentuated by its minimalist design, which included cold mechanical modifications. They were frighteningly alien due to their collective mindset and dispassionate efficiency, reflecting humanity's developing concerns about conformity and technology. The Borg became one of science fiction's most famous and terrifying antagonists because of episodes like The Best of Both Worlds. The budgetary constraints unintentionally produced an inventive solution that saved money and made a timeless nemesis whose presence still enthralls admirers. Gene Roddenberry wanted no conflict among crew. In Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry envisioned a future in which humanity had overcome internal conflicts and was united and progressing. He insisted that the next generation's crew members cooperate and avoid arguing. Although this idealism supported Roddenberry's utopian viewpoint, it presented difficulties for the writers. Episodes risk feeling flat without tension and conflict, often essential for the drama to flourish. The writers focused on philosophical discussions, moral dilemmas, and outside obstacles to overcome this. The series became known for stories like Measure of a Man, which examined the rights of artificial life, and Darmok, which dealt with overcoming cultural barriers. Roddenberry's determination to present a positive picture of humanity set the stage for Star Trek's lasting legacy as a source of inspiration and hope, even though the no-conflict rule was ultimately loosened. Chekhov was introduced to attract younger fans. Pavel Chekhov, the youthful and vivacious navigator of the USS Enterprise, was purposefully added to the crew in Season 2 of the original series to appeal to younger viewers. The popularity of the Monkees, especially Davy Jones, whose youthful appeal and mop-top hairstyle were prevalent at the time, inspired Walter Koenig's character. The producers anticipated Chekhov's appearance would increase the show's attractiveness by attracting adolescent viewers. Beyond his appearance, Chekhov's character offered the team a new viewpoint by frequently exhibiting laughter and excitement that counterbalanced the other characters' more solemn demeanors. There was some humorous relief in his attempts to assert that famous inventions such as Scotch whiskey originated in Russia. Chekhov immediately became a fan favorite and an essential part of the Star Trek history thanks to his young vigor and devotion to the crew. The Mirror Universe wasn't planned as a recurring theme. When the Mirror Universe first appeared in the first episode of the series Mirror, Mirror, it was meant to be a one-time investigation into a more sinister other world. Nonetheless, the idea's enormous fan base guaranteed its status as a recurrent motif in the Star Trek series. The Mirror Universe presented a violent and power-hungry version of the Federation, offering a sharp contrast to the regular timeline's utopian optimism. The moral ambiguity it provided, which permitted well-known individuals to assume wicked or surprising roles, made it appealing. Later, in Enterprise and Discovery, the motif reappeared in Deep Space Nine, where it was a significant theme in multiple episodes. Each series added to the Mirror Universe's lore by examining its effects on various Starfleet periods. The idea's capacity to defy expectations and explore darker narratives guaranteed its enduring appeal to viewers and cemented its status as a franchise-defining feature. Gene Roddenberry's original vision for the Klingons. The brutal, honor-driven warriors we now know are not what Gene Roddenberry had in mind when he first envisioned the Klingons. His original plan was to portray them as noble savages, drawing inspiration from sad, multifaceted characters with a long history of fighting in Shakespeare's plays like Macbeth. The Klingons, however, were aesthetically uninteresting due to financial limitations on the original 1960s series. Their only distinguishing features from humans were their black makeup and bushy eyebrows. They weren't redesigned with recognizable ridged foreheads, commanding appearance, and full-formed warrior culture until Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 1979. As their lore grew, Klingon honor rules, ceremonies, and even their fully formed language, Kliang Hol, were introduced. Fun fact, linguist Mark Okrand formerly created the Klingon language, now one of the most researched fictitious languages worldwide. Fans can even read Shakespearean plays translated into Klingon or enroll in Klingon language training. William Shatner's shocking Rocket Man performance. Although his most well-known role is Captain Kirk, William Shatner is also notable, infamous even, for his musical performances. His strange spoken-word rendition of Elton John's Rocket Man at the 1978 Science Fiction Film Awards stands out as one of his most iconic performances. Wearing a black tux, smoking a cigarette, and making dramatic pauses, Shatner gave a performance that was so theatrically unusual that it quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. At first, many believed it to be a spoof, but Shatner was being quite serious. Later, Family Guy, The Simpsons, and even Elton John himself made fun of the act. Despite the criticism, Shatner embraced his unorthodox musical career, putting out several spoken-word albums, such as The Transformed Man and Has Been, which included collaboration with Ben Folds and other musicians. Whether you like it or not, Shatner's Rocket Man is among the most bizarre and memorable scenes in the history of science fiction. The Enterprise's original design. One of the most iconic starships in science fiction history is the USS Enterprise NCC 1701. However, its design was almost entirely different. Future rocket-style designs and even a flying saucer with antennas were among the first concepts Gene Roddenberry and Matt Jeffries, the show's production designer, had for the ship. The now iconic design, which features a round saucer section, cylindrical engineering hull, and twin-warp nacelles, was the result of Roddenberry's need for something genuinely distinctive. It's interesting to note that Jeffries approached the design with a pragmatic mindset. He wanted it to appear valid, as though it had been created by real engineers from the future. The Jeffries tubes, maintenance tunnels inside the ship, were called in his honor because of his work's influence. Fun fact, future science fiction series like Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica were inspired by the Enterprise, one of the first TV spacecraft with a completely mapped-out interior. The ship still represents adventure, exploration, and hope today, demonstrating that well-designed objects endure. Red Shirt. One of the most well-known Star Trek cliches is the red shirt curse, which holds that crewmen in red uniforms are destined to perish on away missions. The notion that wearing red meant definite disaster is untrue, even if it is true that many crewmen wearing red shirts met tragic ends. Operations officers, engineering teams, and security guards, roles that frequently included risky situations, wore crimson uniforms in the original series. Both blue-shirted science officers and gold-shirted command officers were statistically equally at risk. Minor characters, typically in red, were employed as disposable staff members to provide tension and drama, which is probably why the myth gained popularity. Nevertheless, several well-known red shirts, such as Scotty, could endure across several series. Fun fact, NASA astronauts joke that they don't wear red on space missions since the red shirt cliché has become so popular. The truth is that Starfleet was dangerous for everyone, regardless of uniform color, even if the red shirt joke is still prevalent. Spock's Vulcan nerve pinch was improvised. Leonard Nimoy invented Spock's most well-known ability, the Vulcan nerve pinch, on the spot when Star Trek, the original series, was being filmed. The original script called for Spock to punch an opponent to death, but Nimoy believed Spock's rational and orderly nature didn't lend itself to such a vicious deed. Instead, he suggested a more sophisticated and intelligent substitute, a straightforward but potent pinch to a group of nerves on the neck that instantly knocked the opponent out. Always up for a theatrical touch, Captain Kirk's actor William Shatner played along and slumped convincingly, adding to the move's impact. Throughout several Star Trek episodes, as well as in films, video games, and comic books, the Vulcan nerve pinch swiftly established itself as a signature move. Interestingly, enthusiasts have tried it even though there isn't a biological nerve point that functions in this way in real life. The motion was so well-liked that it even appeared in pop culture parodies, with programs like The Big Bang Theory and The Simpsons honoring Spock's renowned method. Almost canceled after Season 2. Star Trek, the original series, had trouble with poor ratings and high production expenses by the second season's conclusion, 1968. NBC was about to cancel it because they didn't think it was worth continuing. What transpired next, however, turned into one of the first and most effective fan-driven renewal campaigns in television history. Joe and John Trimble spearheaded a major letter-writing campaign to NBC, encouraging the network to renew Star Trek. At the time, the network's headquarters were inundated with over 100,000 letters, an unprecedented volume. Fans were even urged to participate by Gene Roddenberry and Leonard Nimoy. NBC hesitantly renewed Star Trek for a third season, proving the campaign succeeded. But the network rescheduled it for Friday at 10 p.m., which is practically a death sentence to viewership. Star Trek refused to die, even though its third season was brief. As a result of the syndicated reruns, the fan following grew even more, inspiring spin-offs, animated shows, conventions, and films. Instead of becoming a worldwide hit, Star Trek would have remained a forgotten science fiction series without this early fan movement. The Star Trek convention started by accident. When the inaugural Star Trek conference took place in New York City in 1972, it wasn't meant to be a convention. It began as a tiny fan gathering organized by Joe Trimble, a science fiction author, aimed to talk about the series and express their passion for Star Trek. Nevertheless, surprisingly, the gathering became the first official Star Trek convention, which paved the way for the enormous conventions now conducted yearly. Hand gestures is based on Jewish tradition. Leonard Nimoy invented the well-known Vulcan greeting, "Live long and prosper," and the hand gesture that goes with it. In reality, the gesture is based on a traditional Jewish blessing and entails raising the hand with the palm facing forward, the fingers spread out in a V. To give the famous Vulcan gesture a more profoundly personal meaning, Nimoy, who was of Jewish descent, took inspiration from the Kohanim blessing, a blessing bestowed by Jewish priests. The Klingon language. Initially developed for Star Trek, the Klingon language has evolved into a fully functional language with its vocabulary, grammar, and syntax. The language for the Star Trek films was created by linguist Mark Okrand, who produced a new and intricate linguistic framework. Fans have learned to speak and even use the Klingon language in conversation since it was first created. Because of its popularity, there are now Klingon dictionaries, translation applications, and even a Klingon language Star Trek adaptation of Hamlet. Sci-fi political allegory. Star Trek had strong social and political undertones, even though it is most known for examining futuristic technology and interstellar travel. The show frequently reflected on racism, violence, and human rights through its strange planets and conflicts. As a vocal progressive, Gene Roddenberry deliberately tried to include these ideas in the series. For instance, the well-known episode, "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield," tackles racism and discrimination by showing two characters, one white and one black, who are of the same race but have different body colors. Robot Companion. The original plans for the Star Trek series called for a robot companion that resembled the famous R2-D2 droid from Star Wars. The concept was ultimately abandoned, but this robot, named Robo, would have been an essential team member. It's unclear if the idea of a robot crew member was dropped because of financial limitations or just a lack of creativity. The choice was beneficial since it freed up the show to concentrate more on character-driven narratives rather than relying on robotic sidekicks. Famous feud off-screen. As Captain Kirk and Spock, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy had a cherished on-screen bond, but their off-screen relationship was notoriously tense. Disagreements between the two performers were caused by things like Shatner's ego and his need for the limelight. Sometimes Nimoy, who was usually the more restrained of the two, thought that Shatner's extravagant persona took center stage. The two performers, however, eventually made up despite their disagreements, and they were close friends in the years after the first Star Trek series. Constitution. Other names were considered before the USS Enterprise evolved into the iconic vessel we all know and love. USS Constitution, a reference to the famous ship of the same name in the United States, was one of the most well-known options. The choice of Constitution would have given the ship a decidedly patriotic tone, even if the name Enterprise was ultimately chosen for its majestic aspirational implications. Enterprise was the ideal pick, perfectly encapsulating the spirit of exploration and discovery that characterized the series. The Star Trek opening theme. The famous Star Trek opening theme was written in a very short period. The series producers gave composer Alexander Courage very little guidance when he was entrusted with writing the opening piece. At first, Courage was annoyed by the lack of focus, but he went on to compose the expansive orchestral composition that came to represent the franchise. Nevertheless, his work became one of the most well-known TV themes ever, and fans still adore it today.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon